Hello, this is Black Country Blokes Chewing the Fat.
Listen.
I've been hearing a lot lately about men don't talk, but in my experience, men do talk, just people aren't listening. So it's going to be me and a group of blokes discussing our struggles and victories through life. Warning, there may be some bad language, so apologies to all the moms, especially my own. Let's get going.
Listen.
Having ya. It's the Black Country Blokes Chewing the Fat with me, Kev Dillon. And today we're joined by Paul Boggie. Now, Paul Boggie is an ex-squaddie who's had his troubles and battles with heroin. Thank goodness he's clean now. And he's come up with this book, From Heroin to Hero. So, Paul, thank you ever so much, bro, for coming on all the way from sunny Scotland. So, could you tell us a bit about your life, bro?
Hello everyone, thanks Kev, thanks for having me on. I'm Paul Boggie from Scotland. I'm originally from Edinburgh. At the age of 18, I became addicted to heroin. It took 7 years of my life, and I managed to clean myself up at the age of 25. Then, after a few years of rehabilitation, I started boxing, and then started running, started training in the gym as my new addiction. I got extremely fit, and then one day I decided to join the army and become a guardsman in the Scots Guard. We are, standing outside Buckingham Palace with my red tunic and my bearskin, guarding the Queen. So in a nutshell, that is me, and that's my life, and that's the story. There is obviously a lot more to it, but in a nutshell, that's me.
Because we were saying off camera, because my first question to you was like, did you do your service and then get onto heroin? You said, no, unlike so many people who've come back with PTSD, you did it in reverse.
Yeah. So it is quite unique. The fact that I've had that battle with that drug and, managed to turn it around to go on and do a job like what I've done. Unfortunately, there is so many veterans who, after leaving the forces, through things that have happened in Afghanistan or overseas, or they have this traumatic life, that they turn to alcohol or drugs as a coping mechanism. So yeah, it is unique. I would agree with that. I'm not. Most people that I speak to have it's happened to them that way. They've had a life in the army, and then they've been medically discharged or just discharged themselves, and before long, alcohol, more than heroin, certainly for the people that I've spoke to, alcohol seems to be a big one, a major one, certainly in amongst the veterans. And just because alcohol is legal doesn't mean that it's a devastating drug. More so than heroin, I would say, in my opinion. I've seen so many people's lives destroyed by alcohol, more so than heroin.
Because, like, sorry to interrupt you, but I think there's not enough help for when you squaddies finish doing the thing. They turn these young men into machines, and then they don't turn the machine back into a normal man. And I think the transition from going a guy off the street to a guy overseas, and then coming back to the real world, it's so mind-boggling for these young men and women, isn't it?
Well, when I joined the Scots Guard, I was 30, and I had led a life prior. Obviously, a large part of that was on drugs. But when I got into basic training, they were talking about breaking down. We're going to break everybody down, and we're going to build you back up to be guardsmen. And what the signals went.
It's there.
You still there?
Yeah, I'm still here, mate.
Oh, the pictures went right. Yeah. So when I started on in basic training, that was what we were told, that they were going to break everyone down and then build them back up to be guardsmen. And they do that, and they do a great job at it. But like you mentioned there, that once they leave, you're forgotten, and it's such a shame that there are so many veterans, certainly on the streets, sleeping rough. I just find it heartbreaking, and these people are not given the tools and they're not given the support that they need to be able to function in society. Not even close. Not even close. So
I'm going to say something, Paul, and this is going to sound a bit, this might get people's feathers up. But one thing, do you feel like you benefit because you went in as a man at 30 instead of going in as, let's face it, a child at like 18? And the other thing, and this is the controversial bit, because you'd overcome something as life changing as heroin, and you've got the strength to overcome it, do you think that give you the strength to deal with the army, knowing that you can overcome these physical addictions?
yeah, and I remember speaking to one of the sergeants when I was in basic training in the first few weeks, when that was mentioned about this whole breaking these young men down and building them back up. And I remember saying, you're going to have a hard time breaking me down, because my mindset, the mindset that I've got now, I'll not really be broken, because my mind has been broken my whole life. And now that I've realised how to fix myself, I'm not going to allow anybody to break me down again. But, and I said I'll be respectful, and everything that I'll do the way that you teach me to do it. But as far as breaking me down mentally, you're going to have a hard time. So I would suggest no bothering. And then, he was just laughing. It was a nice conversation. I wasn't, and he was like, well, we'll see, Bogey, we'll see. And it turned out to be the case that they couldn't break me down the way that they were breaking down these 17, 18, 19-year-old boys. But yeah, certainly the life that I led prior made me headstrong enough to be able to cope with basic training and just being a soldier. It allowed me to, cope with that so much easier, I reckon.
What do you think, like, if they move, like, not say move the age up, but if we could get like some more mature soldiers from there who've had them large skills, because at 17, 18, the world's such a new, exciting, wonderful, perfect place. When you've grown up a bit, and you can go, oh, hang on, do I actually want to be here? Do you think that might be something?
Well, when I was 30, when I joined the Scots Guard, but the age used to be 27. And when I went to the Army recruitment office in Edinburgh and I walked in and I told them my age, then they informed me that the age is 32. It had just been moved to 32. And I remember doing a physical test in about week 6 of basic training. It was a loaded march with all your weight on the back, your rifle, your boots on. And I think it was a 4 or 5 mile loaded march that we done. There was 40 men. We all went out over the 4 or 5 miles, and the officers and the sergeant majors were at the finish line, all waiting on the guys coming in. The boy in front of me was 29. I was 30, and I think the boy who came in 4th, he was in his late 20s as well. And I remember having a discussion, or them having a discussion when we were all standing there, sort of taking the piss a little bit. saying, look, all the granddads are in first. How is that even possible? And then the officers are saying, well, it just goes to show that if you're dedicated enough with your fitness and you keep up the fitness and you've got the heart, then it can be done. And it's true. Prior to me joining the army, I was properly shitting myself because it was like, right, 18, 19-year-old, they're going to be super fit. They're going to run rings around me. So I was really anxious. So I trained extra hard on the months running up to going to Cataract to do my basic training. And within the first few days, I realised that I was in the first few for all the physical tests that we were doing. And I was the oldest man. I was older than the officers. I was older than the sergeant major. I was older than the sergeants, and I was older than all the corporals. I was the oldest man out of about 40 men. And I was running rings around the young ones. So definitely.
I think that comes to like the difference between mental health and mental strength. Because even though like sometimes you can have mental ill health, but if you're mentally strong in these situations where you're thinking, I've got to be mentally tougher than this young Joey who might run rings around me, but I'm going to get there despite of everything.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that it turned out to be the case that, like, I don't know if it was, these young men that were joining the army, I'm just assuming that they hadn't done much training on the lead up to starting basic training. Some of them turned out to be to get themselves relatively fit by the end, but that's only because of the robustness of the basic training. You're at it every day. You don't have an option. If you're given an option to train every day and do the things that you get put through in basic training, if you have the option not to do that, to go and sit on the Xbox instead, or just give it a miss today, if you had that option, then I think a lot of the young ones would probably have chose to go and sit on the Xbox or the PlayStation and take a few days off here and there. Because they never had that option, they ended up getting extremely fit by the end, and I then struggled. I was still fitter than them. Don't get me wrong, Kev. I was still fitter. But they were catching me up by the end of the 6 months. They were starting to catch me up. But it's a mental thing that you have to be dedicated, I think.
I think that's what we've got to do in life, is back ourselves to the 100 and have that mental belief, not arrogance, because no one likes anyone who's arrogant, but that self-belief, which is confidence. And I'm going to just flip it back to, what was the catalyst to come off the gear, to realise there you are, 7 years into it, and what was it that made you quit and become the man that you are now?
So I'd relapsed 12 or 13 times. I tried to come off the drug so many times. I promised all my family and friends. I meant it 100%. For the bottom of my heart, I meant it. And I struggled so bad that, I'd given up on life. I became depressed. I became suicidal thoughts every day, and I just really had given up. Then I sought help. The first few drug counsellors that I sought help from had literally read it from a book about detox, and I couldn't relate to them. My mind just wouldn't allow me to listen to what they were telling me, how to get clean, how to stop taking heroin. And I was sitting looking at them, and I was thinking, sitting there with their suit and their tie. No disrespect to them, but I just couldn't relate. And I met someone, a drug counsellor, who had been 8 years off heroin, and I couldn't believe it that he was still alive. Then that was when there was a seed planted that day, that it was a possibility. I still wasn't ready myself. I took heroin for many years after that the first time I met him. Took heroin for many years after. But as things started to get really bad, I sought help. I was accepted on a course, and it's through Sirenians. It's a charity up in Edinburgh in Scotland. And I went and done this course. And this course was nothing to do with addiction. It was to do with the mind and how the mind works. It was American. There was an American professor called Lou Tice, and we got this folder called The Breakthrough to Excellence, and basically for a week, it was like a classroom atmosphere, and for a week we just sat and learned about our minds, the power of our mind, the power of choice, the fact that everything, the good, the bad, and the ugly in your life is a choice. Everything that you've done, everything you choose to do from this point forward is a choice. And I didn't believe it for that week. I didn't believe it. I was trying to deflect information, so I thought. Then a few months later, I'd been 7 years on heroin, all other drugs, methadone, antidepressants, Valium, cannabis, codeine, tramadols, everything. And a few months after doing that course, I woke up and something was different. And the only reason that I was able to kick my heroin addiction was through understanding and believing that the choice that I make not to take heroin, it is solely my choice. That was 16 and a half years ago, the last time that I ever touched heroin. And, it's testimony to this day that it is a choice. It's a choice for everyone. But you have to want it. You have to want it enough, and you have to be ready. And I'm finding that with my support group is that some people are just not ready. So,
well, that's what I want to jump in and say, Paul, because anyone who knows anything about addiction, or if you're living with someone who is addicted to something, be it booze, heroin, crack, coke, whatever that voice is, Valium, which I'm glad you mentioned, people they'll try and they'll look you in your eyes and promise you they're going to do it, and they sometimes relapse. But I think it's having that love and compassion to be around them. You're not the first person who's relapsed, and just keep trying. And I think what Paul rightly said as well, I'm so happy you mentioned about the times that you did relapse, and the victory is that you haven't done it in 16 years. It's got to be, as much as I want Paul to stop using heroin, it's when Paul is ready to accept the change. And it is strength to ask for help. It's not a weakness to ask for help. It's a courage to accept the help.
Yeah. And the thing is as well is that the help is out there. But there's not just one way. There's not just one way to break an addiction. And I think that what happens amongst the addicts is that they put so much pressure on themselves because no one wants to be an addict, and I totally understand that society doesn't see that. Society sees addicts hanging around the street, being a nuisance, stealing, robbing people at knife point for money for their fix. That's what society sees. But the truth is that not all addicts are like that. And also the truth is that, the way of breaking addiction is not just there's not just one way. And many addicts will try something to break their addiction and fail, and then beat themselves up for failing, which then drives them into a further depression. and that can be detrimental to your health, of course, and that becomes something that is a regular occurrence. Every time an addict is trying to kick the habit, to better themselves, to pull away from a drug, and for whatever reason they relapse, they feel like a failure. They beat themselves up. Oh, I promised my parents and I promised all my family I'd stop, and now I look like an idiot, and I just feel like rubbish now. But I'm just giving up now, and and they have that mental attitude that's going to end up having them relapsing. But it's important to say, and it's important to mention that there's not just one way to break an addiction. There are many ways. And that's what I'm about, is about sharing my knowledge of breaking addiction. The way that I done it, I broke my back and crushed my spine, and I was medically discharged from the Scots Guard in 2015. I was then put back onto opiate medication. The doctors, all these white coats, told me that I'm on tablets for the rest of my life. I became addicted to these opiate medications, your cocodamols, your tramadols, and the hydrocodines and stuff. And I started abusing them again. And then 8 months ago, I broke that addiction again. I broke it. The reason that I was able to break it, Kev, was when I was writing my book, I was writing about how I broke my heroin addiction. And I remember sitting writing how I broke my heroin addiction. And I remember a light bulb went on in my head whilst I was writing the book, that made me question myself where I'm at right now, 8 months ago. And I was sitting there and I was in a lot of pain in my back. I was swallowing all these tablets like they were Smarties. I was smoking a powder of cannabis to combat the pain, or so I thought, and then I realised, wait a minute, what am I doing? Like, let's try and see what my back is like without all these tablets and without the cannabis. So I broke that addiction, and I've been 8 months drug free now.
How is your back? How is your back now?
My back's just the same. It's crazy. It's a crazy feeling, Kev, honestly. Initially, I was angry. I was so angry at the doctors because they put me on these tablets, and I felt like I didn't have an option. It crushed my spirit and crushed my soul that I'd been put on these tablets, and there was no way off of them because my spine's crushed. So these doctors and specialists had said, Paul, unfortunately, pal, you're just going to have to live with it. You're going to be on these tablets for the rest of your life. You have to accept it. And I believed them. And I got...
You do, don't you? You believe the doctors. You think you're a very educated man and you're looking out for me.
Yep. And I accepted it, Kevin. That was the biggest mistake that I've made since my accident, was that I accepted it. And whilst I was still serving in the army and doing my rehabilitation after my accident, I got put on gabapentin, pregabalin, amitriptyline, nortriptyline, and I became suicidal on these medications. So when I went back to the military doctor, she took me off the gabapentins and the pregabalins and stuff, because we were looking for a drug that was non-opiate. Because they were concerned about my heroin addiction before, rightly so, they said that they're concerned to have me on an opiate medication. But these other tablets were making me suicidal. I was crying all the time. And, I was still a soldier, and I was embarrassed to let the other men in the barracks see me crying. So I used to sit in the car and hide. And I didn't know what was wrong. So I went back and spoke to the doctor and told her, and she said, right, Paul, that's no good. You're coming off them straight away. we're going to put you back on opiate. I know you don't want to go back on your opiate medication, but unfortunately, there isn't an alternative right now. So I was like, that was fine. But being back on those tablets, becoming a drug addict again, you know, and it was through no fault of my own. I wasn't driving the car. I never done anything wrong. I never made any mistakes. I was just sitting a passenger in a car that crashed, and you know, and that was it. But to end up being a drug addict again, it was so horrible. But then when I got medically discharged and I got sent home to Scotland, I was forgotten, and that was. I don't think it was so hard to take at the time because I was taking so many drugs. I didn't really think about it like, you know, the army have forgotten about me. No one's phoning to check up on me. No one's coming to visit me. No one's bothered about how I'm getting on. It didn't bother me because I was on all these tablets. I was a zombie on all these medications. But now when I look back at my life back then, I don't know what good it would have done for the welfare officer to visit me. I think they probably would have seen that the drugs had started to take over my life. The addiction had started to take over my life again, and maybe they could have done more to help try and combat that. But luckily, you know, I already had the tools to break the heroin addiction. So,
but that's what I was going to say. Because you've done it in reverse and you know how it feels to be strung on heroin, you had that as a thing of reference, saying, if I carry on with this, I'm going to be where I was. But if that was your first time of being on opiates, and then you're having to take 2 tablets, where you take 1, then 3, and you're thinking, well, I've heard heroin's the next answer. So it could have been a deal breaker for you, couldn't it?
Definitely, and that's the problem with these prescription medications, right? And this is another thing that society does not understand, is that when you take heroin, it has a physical and a mental effect on your body, and when you take enough of these prescription medications, it's very similar, dangerously close. I could take an amount of codeine or an amount of tramadol that would make me feel very similar to how I would feel when I was on heroin. And I don't know, it just doesn't seem to be common knowledge. But I can tell you now, Kev, pharmaceutical companies will hate me for what I have to say about it. I know they will, but I feel in my life for what I've been through, I think I deserve to be able to. I need to be able to speak about it openly to try and help people who are on these medications that are given to them by the doctor, and again, there's alternatives. There is alternatives to help with pain. You've got CBD oils. You've got these wonder drugs that are natural, that are a better alternative than pumping your body full of man-made chemicals that are, you know, very, very close and very similar to the feeling that you get from heroin. And, you know, my back, I'm in pain every day. And when I was on all my tablets, you know, I was on eight strong tramadols a day, and cannabis. When I was taking all these drugs, my back was still sore. Right, the pain doesn't go away. My spine's crushed, and there's no amount of tablets that's going to. There's not going to be a miracle cure. Short of me getting morphine, IV morphine every day, I'm going to have to suffer this pain for the rest of my life. That's just the way that it is. But what I realised when I came off these tablets, I tapered myself off very slowly over the space of a couple of weeks and stopped the cannabis. and my back was no worse. It wasn't any better, and it wasn't any worse. And that's when I said earlier about being angry. I was angry that I hadn't done it sooner. Then I quickly realised that by being angry, that serves no purpose for doing anything positive in my life. So, I decided to sort of disregard that, say that it is what it is, it's life. Get
I
on
think
with
we've
it.
got the right to be angry, but it's how long we stay angry. Like if you in that car accident or you get hit by a car, you're allowed to feel angry at the person who's run you over. But where does that anger go? It goes into the universe. You blame God, you blame whatever. But it's not making life any better, is it? Anger and blame. You've got to accept it and think about how you're going to deal with it, get around it, move on from it, own the situation, and then try and build from it.
Yeah, I think being angry is human nature.
Yeah, of course.
Everybody does. But like you said there, that anger only hurts you. The person who you're angry at, they're not going to be affected the same way that you're going to be affected by staying angry. So as hard as it is, because we are all human, everybody does get angry. It is learning to switch that anger off. And acknowledging that it's okay to get angry. It's okay to get angry. It's what you do with the anger. You can use it. You can use the anger in a positive way. And again, that's just something that a lot of people don't do. Maybe a lot of people don't realize that it's possible to be able to use such an emotion as anger, to use it in a positive way. But you certainly can, and it doesn't. For me being angry serves me or my family no purpose. So I just decided to be very happy that I had stopped on my medication, and then my back wasn't any worse than what it was, and I felt amazing, absolutely amazing.
A quick question. When you first come off the legal stuff,
Yeah,
we get side effects.
yeah,
That's all. Yeah.
yeah.
So just so someone else who's doing it, they can be aware of what you went through, and it's natural. They will feel the same.
Yeah. So when I tapered off my medications very slowly. So for the first few days, you don't notice anything because you're still taking. For instance, I was on 8 tablets a day. When I decided, when I was writing this book, that I'm going to try and come off all these tablets, I very quickly went to 6 tablets a day. My body never noticed any difference. There was no withdrawals, no side effects, because I was still on such a large amount of tablets. So then from 6, I went to 5. Then when I got down to 4, which is that's as few as I'd been on for that whole time, in any one day. I'd never taken any less than 4 before. I started to snap my tablets in 2. And I went from 4 to 3.5. And then as I was starting to come down at the lower doses, I started to feel rubbish. I felt a little bit anxious. I was probably anxious about the pain in my back getting worse, which fortunately it never. But I had these whole anxieties that made me a little bit nervous about, am I going to be able to do it? But I soon realised that the physical side, the physical side of the addiction was relatively easy, and I don't say that very. I don't want to insult anyone by saying that, but I tapered off. The physical symptoms and the physical side of the addiction that I was breaking was easy in comparison to the mental side of the addiction. I thought about my tablets every single minute of every single day.
And that's addiction, isn't it? When you're like that.
And that went on for 3 months. So that was something that was very, very difficult, and it was hard to explain into my support group that I have on Facebook. I was trying to explain it to all these addicts that are in my group, but it's a mental thing that whenever the physical side, like I said, was relatively easy. My back pain wasn't any worse, so I didn't have that concern. What the concern was that I had was that when I became bored in lockdown, I'm stuck in this house in the same 4 walls for 8 months, and I had tablets in the house that I knew would cure my boredom. If I knew at that moment, after being clean off my prescription medications for a week or 2 weeks, I knew that if I went and took 8 tramadol that day, that I wouldn't be bored anymore. Because that's the benefit of taking stupid amounts of drugs, is that you're not bored. So I remember sitting for long periods of time in my living room, constantly thinking, how good would it be just to go and have a few tablets, just not to be bored for a couple of hours, And I never. But that's the most difficult part of the addiction to break, is those initial months after getting off and getting clean physically, because your body will get better. The body's a wonderful thing. Once your appetite will pick up, your mood will get better. There's loads of positive things that will happen once you break the physical addiction, but mentally is where you really need to work on yourself. You need to be aware of how difficult it is going to be, but be aware that it's possible. And if you want to change your life enough, it's there for the taking. You just have to stay strong and ask for help when the time comes where you are lonely, you're bored, you're angry, all these negative emotions. Whenever any of these pop their ugly heads up in your head, ask for help. And help doesn't have to come in the way of a rehab centre. It doesn't have to come in the way of an alternative drug. Sometimes help just has to come through talking to one of your friends on the phone for half an hour.
What we always say on the Black Country Blokes is, you've got to find your medicine.
Yeah, and there's so many different ways that I combated it, and I share that with everyone. So I write as a way of combating that addiction, that need, or that feeling that I want to take tablets, I want to take these prescription medications. When I feel like that, pick up a pen, pick up a bit of paper, draw some pictures, write down how I feel. If I'm feeling like crap, I'll write down exactly how I feel. I write down why I feel rubbish. If I'm angry, I write down why I feel angry. I rip that bit of paper up and put it in the bin when I feel better. It doesn't matter. It just serves a purpose to get it out of my head. But it can be anything. It can be playing chess, boxing, running. There's millions of positive things that you can do just for that moment of weakness that you're having, that you're thinking about relapsing. When you're thinking about that, if you reach out and do something positive for that short period of time, that will serve you well for the coming months, and it will ensure that you break the addiction and you keep the addiction broken. Because, I'm not perfect. I still get angry on occasions. I still feel sad on occasions. And when I feel like that, I know what I need to do to be able to combat it, which is seek help. And because of lockdown, I can't go and see my friends. I can't go and see my family. My wife's at her work all day. You know, the bairn's at college all day. I'm sitting in the house on my own. So I know that I have to find something that I can do on my own to combat it. And if it's something as simple as picking up a bit of pen, a bit of paper and a pen, and starting writing or drawing a picture, it's just a distraction technique. Is all that's needed just to take your mind off it.
And I think that's why it's been so hard this last however many months, 9, 10 months, where we haven't just been able to nip to the gym, go and see your mom, go, you know, and we've seemed to have had all them fun things taken away. And I think that's when, what's that old saying? The devil makes work of idle hands. When you're bored, that's when you do start having a few more fags, a few more cans, a few more bags of whatever, a few tablets, because we're in lockdown, it doesn't matter. I'll deal with the reality when we get to the real world. But by that stage, the habit's created, isn't it?
See, the lockdown, Kev, honestly, are the government not aware how difficult it is for people that were already suffering with mental health issues, right? Just disregard the people that have got them now that never had them, right, for a second. Let's just concentrate on the people that were depressed prior. Like, when I think to myself now how much more difficult their lives are now, it really does sadden me. And then it also saddens me that these people that use the gym, they go boxing every day. You know, for me, I used boxing as an anger management. I was an angry man. I was angry at the world. I was angry at myself. I was angry at complete strangers in the street for no reason. I'd fly off the handle, and before you know it, I'm effing and seeing back at someone who I don't even know because he never held the door for me. Stupid, trivial things. But when I started boxing, it released these endorphins and it just made me feel amazing. And so I done it every day because I knew that how good it made me feel. You shut the boxing gyms all across the country. Let's just shut them. Let's not have any thoughts for these people that are professional boxers. They get paid to go to the gym. We're not talking about these people. We're talking about the amateur boxers, the young kids who are keeping themselves off the street corner, out of the gangs, by going to a boxing gym every night and learning discipline and learning respect, right? But no, let's just disregard that. Let's just shut all the gyms anyway, and we'll just disregard all the boxing gyms and all the martial arts clubs. Just shut everything.
It's because the politicians don't actually walk into an amateur boxing gym and it's, oh, you're teaching young people how to fight. No, I'm encouraging them not to fight. I want them to box and teach them those life skills of we're animals. We want to hit something. We want to let off the steam, but we don't want to go out being hooligans. So we're trying to give those rogues and scallies and buggers a bit of light, a bit of love, because a lot of the people who come in to so many clubs around the country, the world, we are their families. And when the family has to shut the door on them, they go and find the other families on the street doing street life.
Yeah, and that's what lockdowns caused. You know, that I don't think back in March anybody could have anticipated that come Christmas time we're still going to be locked in the house like we are. But the reality is that we have been, and the amount of young kids now who will be running in the street gangs and may not ever find their way back into a boxing gym because they get
find
shot,
a new role model, don't you? You find a new role model.
You know, they're going to. You run with the crows, you get shot down with the crows. So, you know, there's a chance that these people are going to end up locked up. Young kids, 18-year-old. He was at the gym every day. He was learning how to box. He was learning discipline, self-respect, respect for others. He was learning all these important traits that you should be learning as a young man. And he no longer has that outlet. So then he goes hanging around with the people that he was trying to get away from his estate, because there's no option. He lives there. He sees him every day, right? So he starts running around with him again, and something goes down. You're in the wrong place at the wrong time. Something happens, and then he gets locked up, and then it's just like such a waste and such a shame that that's happened, or it will happen. There's no doubt in my mind it'll happen. It's probably already happened, to be fair. It's just, I don't know. I don't know what the government are thinking with closing all these gyms and boxing clubs and martial art clubs, and it just, I don't know. I just hope that it doesn't continue for much longer, because everybody's struggling. Mental health is on the rise. Suicide is on the rise, and it's only going to get worse.
With Christmas around the corner, and when daddies can't put dinners on tables and presents under trees, we're going to see a massive boom with the poor blokes. But this
businesses are going under. You know, so then again, you have these people that were business owners. Their businesses have crumbled. Can you blame them for being depressed? Can you blame them for reaching for a bottle of whiskey? Can you blame them for reaching for some Valium to take away that pain? I don't blame them. I feel so sorry for them that, you know, the business that they've worked so long in building has crumbled. They've been given no support, and potentially they're going to end up an addict.
But this is why it's been so wonderful, Paul, to get you on. Before I advertise next show, can you just tell everyone where to find your book, Heroin to Hero?
Yeah, so my book is on Amazon at the moment. I self-published on Amazon in March due to the COVID. You know, publishers and stuff were closed, so I self-published on Amazon. It's there on ebook and paperback. All profits from my book go to homelessness in Scotland. Something that at the moment I have raised just over £3,000 to go and buy sleeping bags, hopefully military ones, to go out and help the people in Scotland, because it's absolutely freezing right now. But yeah, my book's on Amazon, so I'd appreciate it if anybody does want to hear my story. Also know that when you do buy the book, it is going to a great cause as well.
I know Lee Cadman's read it, and it's such a shame he couldn't come on today. But Lee's doing all the digital work for us. Lee's poorly, but he said it's an absolutely brilliant read. So on Thursday, guys, we're doing a bit lighter-hearted. It's First for a Thoughtful Thursday, and we're going to go very Black Country on this one. We're going to be laughing about if the Black Country had our very own Love Island, would we call it bonking on the barge, separating wenches from the whammels and blokes from the nanas. So be a part of just something silly, light-hearted, and reminding ourselves to have a bloody good laugh now and then, and be proud. As Paul's proud of being a Scotsman, we're proud of being from the Black Country. We're proud of where you're from. But Paul, I'm going to ask you, like I've asked everyone else, have you got any quotes or sayings that have got you through life?
I think in recent years, I think my favourite quote that I use all the time is, all that's needed for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing.
Beautiful. Well, thank you once again, brother, for coming on. So
Thank
guys,
you, Kev.
no, thank you. So guys, until we see each other next time, take care of yourselves and each other. Ta-ra a bit.
Listen.
And that's a wrap for another show. But if there are any comments or messages that you would like us to read out for our next podcast, please be in touch. There are also lots of different organisations at the bottom of this page, and hopefully they can help you or someone you care about. Please share this to spread the word. Until we talk next time, ta-ra a bit.
Listen.